Hey guys, how you doing? Um, I'm Keith, and this is Julie,
Hello.
and my pronouns are he and him, and I'm identifying as a male person, a cis male today.
No, sis, you are
So,
just what you are. Oh my gosh, don't
and
make me
I'm wearing
mad.
a black shirt, and I'm sitting in this chair, so there's no confusion with Julie, who's identifying as a I'm not sure what she's identifying as today.
I am myself.
She's a
No,
cis.
I'm not a
Oh, okay.
sis.
Okay.
I
Never
am
mind.
what I am. All
Okay.
right.
All right. Bye
Is that
bye.
a video or
I
is
think
that a
it's.
blooper?
I don't know if it's pie pie or the burning bush, but something like that.
That's not something you're going to hear on most videos. I don't know if it's pie pie or the burning bush. That's not
Yes.
something you're going to
Yeah.
get in other
Don't
places.
really. You don't. You just don't get that stuff everywhere,
No,
folks.
you don't. You don't.
All right. Today, I thought that we would discuss something. Several years ago, actually, it was the first time that I went and spoke to a prison or a group at a prison. Uh, Not the whole prison at once,
It would
but I
be
went.
hard.
Yeah, it would be.
Warden, get in here. I'm
Yeah,
going to talk
it'd
to
be
you.
calm down. Yeah, that wouldn't
Put your
be
guns
that wouldn't
away.
be good. Anyhow, so I was invited to go speak to a congregation some years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and so I did. Didn't really know what I was going to do, so I just went in there and did what I do a lot of times: just start talking, open my mouth, and go for about an hour or so. And when I got through, one of the people that were there with us, another volunteer, was not real happy with a lot of the things that I said. And he said he had a lot of real concerns about different things that I said, that it sounded, some of it sounded like mysticism and had Kabbalistic tones and sounded like Gnosticism and some of these kinds of things.
Scary stuff.
And, those are some adjectives, some terminology that gets thrown around sometimes at things that we do. And lately it seems like I've been seeing quite a bit of that, of these posts on Facebook and places, concerned and warning people about mysticism and that sort of thing. And so I thought it might be of interest to you for us to have a conversation, and we're going to try to do more of more conversing back and forth together, rather than just it's tough, rather than just talking to you. We're going to try to, because that's really kind of how a lot of this evolved anyway, was from our conversations that we would just be sitting around having at home, and we did that for years and years. And so we thought, well, hey, maybe we'll make these available for other people to check out. So this idea of mysticism, I think, is something that we need to have a conversation about. I don't claim to be an expert on it. I don't think Julie would either. But most of the people warning about it sure are not
Certainly aren't.
experts
Yeah.
on this subject. And so I'd like to dig into that a little bit. Is there any questions that you can think of, or any other related things to this topic? Or is there any disclaimers that we want to or should add before we delve into this?
Well, I mean, there's a difference between, and how long do we have for the video? This may have to be a series. There's a difference
Probably.
between Satanism, spiritualism, what people call occultism, and true biblical, our word is mysticism, which is basically how we view it. It's the sod, basically the sod level of the scriptures, of the Hebrew scriptures.
Well, I would even go beyond
Yeah.
that, and we'll get into that down the road, of explaining a little bit more about that term that she said, sod, which is the Hebrew word for secret or a mystery. Which ties right into all this, but
Sure.
I wouldn't limit it to just that. I
No,
think
it's not.
it's something much more broad. You said a term there that might be, maybe let's start out. Let's try to define mysticism, because a lot of times, you know, people have these ideas about what they maybe think
Yeah.
words mean, or what, when
Or
they
we're
hear that
taught.
word,
Yeah.
what images come to mind for you, maybe when you hear it.
And for
so
me, when we started, all this.
Well, yeah, me too. Let me see if I can find it here.
Webster's.
Yeah, this is Merriam-Webster here, and let's see. This is mystic. Let me see. Let's look at mysticism. And mysticism. And you will run into quite a few definitions about that. This is, who is this? This is vocabulary.com. Mysticism is a religion or religious belief based on union or communion with a deity or divine being. Mysticism is what lets you transcend the physical world or physical to experience enlightenment. This is more of a commentary, but giving a little bit of definition there. That's vocabulary.com. I was wanting to see Merriam-Webster, which I thought. Here is, if you just type in mysticism, definitions, words, I think, from learnreligions.com, it says the word mysticism comes from the Greek word mystes, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which refers to an initiate of a secret cult. It means the pursuit or achievement of personal communion with or joining with God or some other form of the divine or ultimate truth. A person who successfully pursues and gains such communion can be called a mystic. So that's pretty broad. Here is the Merriam-Webster definition. I don't mean to bombard you with a bunch of definitions, but we need to have something to work with here to have a legitimate conversation.
To just start here, to start in an objective sense with a definition and kind of work our way out from there.
This is the first definition in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. It says the experience of mystical union or direct communion with the ultimate reality reported by mystics. Second one is the belief that direct knowledge of God, spiritual truth, or ultimate reality can be attained through subjective experience, such as intuition or insight. And then I'm going to skip down here and hit on a theory postulating the possibility of direct and intuitive acquisition of ineffable knowledge or power. So maybe that gives us a little bit of something to
start with.
Yeah, to begin the discussion with. So this idea, in essence, and you can look at it yourself and see what you think about that. In essence, it seems like most of these definitions are something like mysticism is union with the divine or the pursuit of it. So is that something in line? Is that something that the Bible is for or against? Is that a biblical belief of the pursuit of union with God, or is that an anti-biblical view?
Well, what's the point of everything if you're not pursuing God in a relationship with God? And I mean, we were talking about this earlier, that God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. We have a spirit, according to the scriptures, but we're carnal. We're in carnal flesh in time and space. And so if the purpose of God for creating man, was to experience a relationship or connection with something other than himself, there's going to have to be a way to transcend the barriers and differences between that and where we are. We can't just bring God, who is a spirit, down, if you want to say down from heaven, off of his throne, to sit in here and have a conversation, have a relationship. And I mean, I know that God does descend and meet people through the Holy Spirit, through angels, through all of the divine ecosystem, many different ways. But there's going to have to be some strangeness, if you want to say it that way, some unknownness, some strange terrain to navigate when we are used to living in this kind of world, dealing with the cares of this world and paying our bills and buying chicken and paying mortgages and working and pulling up weeds and raising kids or whatever it is we're doing. There has to be something when you transcend and go toward God as God is, then that journey can't look like a journey of 1,000 steps on the face of the earth. Like if I want to go walk to the next town over, it's 9 miles, I can do that. That's a lateral move. I mean, I'm walking across, my actual foot is walking on actual earth, and I know the way. There's no mystery in it. I may have never done it before, but there's no mystery there. I know what I will encounter. It's hot, it's hard, I'm not used to walking 9 miles. But when you decide that your trajectory is going to be into a realm you don't understand, you can't even comprehend, with a being that you can't comprehend, you have to take into consideration that that journey is going to be different outside of your experience.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that a lot of these things people yearn for
I
and
agree.
intuitively know, yet certain terminology, and often, speaking of mysticism, often we are warned against Eastern mysticism, and rarely am I ever warned against Western
Western mysticism,
mysticism.
Southern,
And
Northern.
there are both, but so in essence, it's sort of like clearly to me, I think if we're having a legitimate conversation, honestly, and words mean things, and that we're using known working definition of words, that the Bible is a mystical book about mystical experiences and about the ultimate goal of union with God.
Well, and what Christians, most believers will say is that God is the author of the Bible. If that's true, he's not a human being. I mean, that he moved, that it's divinely inspired is
Inspired,
what I mean.
right.
Yeah, that he used human beings to write it, but that ultimately he is the author of that. So how can he, being a spirit and not a man, being the original author and inspiration of that book, how can it not be and use whatever word. I mean, sometimes I think people get caught up in the mysticism and mystic and that word. It
They
trips
do.
them up because they've been taught that it's a bad word.
Mm-hmm.
Divine, heavenly, spiritual, I mean, whatever word that you have to use to nail the concept down in your mind, that he's not a human being. He doesn't have arms and legs. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
well,
That's a whole nother thing there.
and I'm not saying that
Mm-hmm.
he can't choose to take different forms or to send his son in his express image and all of that. I'm just saying that we have to begin to conceptualize the differences because they are definitely there. And so when you say the Bible is a mystical book, okay, the Bible's a spiritual book. The Bible's a divine book. The Bible is a book whose original author or God-breathed essence comes from a different place and dimension. Not just a different place and dimension, but the ultimate.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, semantically, the words mystical is related to our word mystery. And like that's a
Yep.
word that we see quite often in the King James
Yes.
version of the Bible, is this idea of the mysteries or mysteries.
Well,
And
sure.
yet that's something that makes people pretty uncomfortable too. And I remember this guy that I referenced earlier, and how gosh, there were some things that I said. I mean, I wasn't adding to the scripture at all. I was just simply saying what was there, but it greatly disturbed him. And it was out of the New Testament. Maybe I don't know if we'll have time to talk about that today or not. But let's in our remaining time, let's kind of maybe deal with this idea, is a couple of aspects of God that is much more understood and focused upon in Hebraic thought than usually in your typical Christian thought. To most Christians, they can't maybe, although they will recognize and acknowledge that, are there things about God that you don't understand? They would probably say, sure, there's a lot of things that, but
They don't even know.
yeah, I don't think that maybe they've even thought or really conceived and really tried to stretch their mind up to imagine how little we understand, and most of what we think we understand is probably incorrect or flawed in some way. But the idea that God withholds manifesting himself or truth, that he conceals himself or conceals truth, is a bit offensive, I think, to a lot of people.
Well, and I agree, and I don't quite understand that because people get the concept of that, especially if they're a parent. There are things that a parent knows, an adult knows, all the wisdom that they know, things they know, that they don't just tell the kid, like a 5-year-old kid, every single thing that they think and know, and all of these deep meanings behind things, because the kid can't process.
It's not appropriate in a lot of cases.
And it's not even context, there's no context for it. They're just not able to hold it, and so they have to wait until the child has developed more, and then it's more time released as the situation is appropriate and all of that. And so they understand that concept of withholding information. It's not that you're trying to be mean or you're trying to be whatever's offensive to people. It's just that, people say, I just want this answered. I just want you to answer me, God. And I think a lot of times, even if he were to somehow deliver the answer to them by an angel or something to expound on, give them the whole answer to the problem, it would just be like, huh?
Right.
Like, we don't understand the whole way God even is or lives and all that spins out from him. And I'm not trying to make this complex. I'm just saying we're illustrating the fact that there are mysteries and things that are unknown. And you don't, while you get a glimpse of that in the English translations of the Bible, going back to the Hebrew and even to the Greek to some degree, but especially the Hebrew, it begins to show these layers of complexity that are revealing things about God. But you could live several lifetimes and not even scratch the surface of all of this. And how can that be offensive? That's just the way it is. He's God.
Yeah, it will. Once again, sometimes our cognitive dissonance gets in our way because a lot of you, I might say, are there things that you understand? Are there truths, spiritual truths, or things about the Creator that you understand now that you used to not understand?
Right.
If that's true, then at one time, those things were concealed to you. It was a mystery. And through some means of revelation, it was revealed to you. And so that is a principle throughout the Bible. I constantly quote the passage from Psalm 25, verse 2. It's the glory of God to conceal a thing, the honor of kings to search out the matter. And as I've said so often, the word thing and matter there is the same Hebrew word. It's the word devar that's often translated as word or a concept, a thought even. So it's the glory of God to conceal a word or concept or a paradigm, a way something works, but it's the honor of kings to search these things out and then learn to and have it revealed or opened up to them. By the way, that's another kind of a hot word that is disturbing to people, is this word of occult. And and I don't mean to freak everybody out with a lot of this, but hopefully we can we just have an honest conversation here without getting all froggy. Yeah, I mean, we're not going to reach out there and hold you down and make you believe something you don't want to or anything. We're just trying to have a conversation without being superstitious or afraid, and just see what the truth is. Ask questions, study the scriptures, study everything that we can to better illuminate these things.
Well, and you said something about disclaimers earlier. And I mean, if you want to say disclaimer, there would be something that I would say. Keith and I definitely want to stay within the legitimate boundaries of what the God of Israel dictates is right and wrong. Absolutely. The problem has come in, though, when we've allowed other institutions and other people and the culture over all of these, these 2 millennia, to tell us what is and isn't okay. And I mean, even just going back through history as an example, just a few hundred years ago, like in England, now people freak out over astrology and different things, but as a matter of course, believers just a few hundred years ago, the sovereigns of different countries would call the astrologers in whenever they had a child, and it was perfectly acceptable. And I'm not here to say astrology is okay. I'm using that necessarily. I'm here to say that's an example of something that in a religious environment was accepted as okay, whether it is or isn't. It was something that was accepted as okay at that time, and then later or before that might get you burned at the stake, depending, and even in that country at a different time frame.
Right. Yeah, and we're constantly talking about various paradigms of belief, and hence paradigm media. But all of these factors that cause us to see the world, and hence the scriptures, through a particular inherited lens usually. And so like our time, I mean, when we go back and we look at maybe like someone like King Henry VIII, at that time, and I think he wrote some treatise on this or something of about the transubstantiation of the in their worldview, in their theology of the Holy Communion and all of that.
The wafer becoming
Does
the
it
actual body.
literally become the actual literal body of Messiah, and does the grape juice or wine literally become his blood?
Which was before he left the church, the Catholic Church, and formed his own church. But I mean,
that's something you probably haven't thought about lately, or probably haven't had any theological arguments about that. But that's what everybody was arguing about at that time, vehemently.
Right.
And this was serious business.
it was.
And that was like one of the top theological divisive issues at that time. Nowadays, nobody talks
cares.
about that.
Well, at least Protestants don't care.
Probably no.
typically.
I don't hear anybody discussing it anymore.
Well, it's not likely to get you killed now.
No.
It's certainly something that would get you killed in the right time frame.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of things would, even over here in the country, the famous Salem witch trials and stuff like that.
True.
And so we want to get away. A lot of this superstition is unconscious that still works, that has still been inherited and passed on.
We're afraid.
Yeah, well, it's good to be cautious. I'm not encouraging people just to dive into a lot of unknown things. That's not wise at all.
No.
But on the other hand, I think it is also unwise to just resist and reject anything that falls beyond the religious paradigm of the day. They have subconsciously probably planted notions in your mind that if you step out beyond a certain boundary, the dragons are going to get you.
Or the men in black are going to come drag you off and tie you to the stake and burn you. But in terms of a cult or occultism, like all we really, bringing that up, the only point that we're really trying to make is when we say that word occultic or occult or occultism, you automatically, just like we did, have a reaction and a definition and a belief about what that word actually means. And occultism is not synonymous with Satanism.
Well, yeah, all that
It's
word
not.
means, it would be almost like saying ambiguous or
Hidden.
hidden, concealed. That's what the word means. But once again, like the word mysticism or like the word occult, it's been sort of run through a blender, and it's been infused with a lot of superstitious and add-on ideas.
Well, to control, I mean, a lot of, and I'm not trying to just pull down every establishment. I want to see Zion be established. I want to see the truth be established and God's boundaries be known and honored. But in terms of accepting all of this theology and almost like junk DNA, which I don't believe in junk DNA, but like junk theology in our subconscious self, you have to start bringing the light to that and asking what's there if you really want to know what the truth is and how God really feels about something. Because the reality is, when you do an honest study of the scriptures and you look and you read about the prophets and about the priests and about different things, judges, there's different, any of the books of the prophets, they're going to have some really strange things in them that look like divination, that look like sorcery, that look like a lot of these things that, I mean, even, and I don't mean to kick a hornet's nest when I say this, because I'm not saying there's not a difference, there is. But the thing that Saul did when he used the witch of Endor to call up Samuel, wherever that is, in Samuel or Kings or wherever it is, he was judged for that, but then on the Mount of Transfiguration, Yeshua did appear with two people who had, in the timeline, died, and at the very least, if you don't believe Elijah died, Moses absolutely did die. And so, again, I'm not saying that's the same thing. It isn't. I'm saying that we need to understand the difference between what God is doing through his prophets and through his people and what has been prohibited by the scriptures. There's a difference there between the okay and the not okay from God's perspective and the word's perspective, but then there is an okay and not okay from the culture's perspective. And it depends on the culture that you're asking. We've got all these different denominations, and we have them because they all focus in on one little thing, and if you don't believe this or get it right, you're going to hell. And we're looking for an inclusive truth.
Unified field.
Yes, it's an
Yeah.
inclusive truth. It's not inclusion in that anything goes and there's not any right or wrong. It's letting God dictate what the boundaries are, not what we've been taught he means, but actually wrestling in all
Right.
of that down and trying to do our due diligence like the Bereans to really find out what it's talking about and what God means when he says certain things, so that we know the mind of God. Then however men feel or think about what we're believing and saying, it may get us killed. I mean, depending on the time frame and where we live, but it will, if we know how God feels about something, that will take the pressure off.
Yeah, certainly will. I want to keep this relatively short, but I'd like to... No, that's great. I'm glad you said those things. But I'd like to read a couple of verses to you and we could... There's a whole lot of them. And so I'm just limiting it to a very few. Deuteronomy chapter 29:29, it says, "The secret things belong unto the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong to us and our children forever, that we may do all the words of this Torah," or law. So it talks, once again, it talks about secret things or concealed things and revealed things, or exposed or made known, or
Occult things.
Yeah, basically.
Hidden, concealed, and then things that are made known.
Proverbs. When we look at what's the purpose of Proverbs, or some of the purpose of it. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1. "The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment, and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels, to understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings." So we're talking this is mysticism. Proverbs right here. This is mysteries. This is hidden things, concealed things. But the wise are like the kings earlier that I said, those who have obtained a level of sovereignty, personal sovereignty. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing or hide it, keep it secret. But it is the honor of kings, those who have stepped into their personal sovereignty, to search out and seek out the answers to these things.
Absolutely.
And how about this one right here in Proverbs 25:14? Because again, I have been, and I don't mean to sound offensive about this, because I'm really not at this point, because I've been so used to it, and after a while you just kind of get to where you ignore a lot of the naysayers and people speaking out of their own biases, preconceptions, and misunderstandings and fear. Yeah, most of the time when we begin to pull back the layers up on that, that's what it is. It's fear.
Well, I mean, we're taught to be afraid, and fear's not a bad... fear is...
Not always.
No. I mean, it's a restricting force that, they learn to fear the God of Israel, lest he would break out upon them at different times in different ways.
Wisdom.
Yeah, fear the Lord is in understanding where the boundary is. But there's a difference between healthy fear that comes from the holiness of God and being afraid because of what the culture, religious culture, or our own upbringing or osmosis has said I don't want to be barred. I don't want my way to God and direct experience to God being barred by things that are really not boundaries. I don't want that. I want to clear that up. And whatever God says a border or a boundary, it absolutely stands. But if He is not identifying something as an obstacle or a bad thing, I don't want to be constrained by man's fear or man's understanding when they're not pursuing a relationship at that level with the living God.
Exactly. In the first century, the status quo religious affiliations were preventing people,
Yes.
most of it seems like, of the organized religion of that day. Yeshua said that you've taken away the key of knowledge, and that in another place he said that you won't enter in.
Right.
That is the leaders,
Right.
those people with the degrees upon their lawyers, the degrees upon their walls, and all of these credentials and things, that they weren't entering in. In other words, it was just a carnal practice and exercise. But that's bad enough. But then they were preventing others from moving into the kingdom and connecting, once again, cleaving to, achieving that union with the divine. They were stopping people and putting roadblocks in their way.
Of course they were, because they wanted to be able to utilize Yeshua's power and press, his popularity for their own ends. But he wasn't here for that. He was here to remove every obstacle and every weight and every chain off of people between God and man. And what he was here to plant, the kingdom of Zion, actually, just like Moses' serpent was swallow up all the other serpents, the kingdom that he planted was swallow up all the other kingdoms, and they didn't want their kingdom swallowed up. And I'm not just throwing the Pharisees, like those awful Pharisees that were legalistic. I'm just saying the ones in that group or in any group. Because you had Pharisees that followed Yeshua.
Yeah, and that's left out a lot of times.
It is left out. I mean, you had people from all walks of life, rich and poor and all of this, Jew and not Jew, that were interested in his words. And then you had the people that didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole if he wasn't going to align his celebrity to their purposes, because they didn't want their kingdom and their system and their power undermined by some upstart mystic that was actually trying to lay the foundation of the kingdom of heaven in the souls of men. And it's no different today.
And that's living truth will burst the paradigms or the wineskins
it will.
of organized religion.
It's meant
and
to.
That's part of what we're here for, I feel like, is to help do that and help point the way to the ancient paths. A lot of these things that have been lost or forgotten.
Right.
And we are also in a time of the restoration of all things that Acts chapter 3 talks about. So many things that have been lost, forgotten, broken, damaged, destroyed are being brought back in our time. And I know that there are so many people that feel this, like they may not know what to do, and we're not claiming to have all of those answers either. But we're no longer content to just stay within the framework, within the narrow boundaries that organized religion allows us to be in and to dwell in and to wonder about or to study.
Well, and even our social groups. I mean, there have been things over and over in my life that I don't know if everyone's this way, but certain things I can study and get the theory of, and I can try to understand them through books and through learning and even through praying for understanding. But until I put boots on the ground and go into some of those areas, and it's a little, people might say, well, that's a little risky. Well, maybe it is, but I've learned to pray what I call insurance prayers. Father, you understand my motive. You understand what I'm after here. I'm after truth that's going to bring me closer to you. I want to throw off every weight. And if I get into areas that you have not sanctioned and you don't want me to be in, then cause me to know that, because my motive is pure. I'm looking for you, and I'm looking to throw off the weights of the kingdom of the world that have put between me and you, potentially, so that I can be more like you and connect with you and not be afraid of man so dang much. I mean, and there have been things in my life that I have gotten crossways with different people who thought I was off into sorcery and off into this and off into that and all the, you got to be careful, you got to be careful, you got to be careful. Look, anybody that knows me Anybody that knows me at all understands that's not something you have to say to me. I'm going to be careful, but I'm also going to go over the fence of what's comfortable for most people to go turn aside and see the sight of why the bush doesn't burn.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
you have to. You have to get out of your comfort zone, because the living God isn't going to meet you for tea and come in a suit and sit down in a chair. You're going to have to be gotten out of your comfort zone
Right.
and feel your world shaken up a little bit if you want to begin following in the footsteps of the Messiah, who is the express image of God.
Right, and we're told by Paul to be not conformed to this world. And so we hear these things so much that a lot of times we just end up turning a deaf ear to it, or just by rote cite it and quote it or hear it and just like, yeah. But said another way of what really the essence of that meaning is, don't conform to the culture. And that means the religious culture too, that you don't want to necessarily conform. You're called to be nonconformist when it comes to certain things, but we're to be transformed. Notice the contrast of conforming and transformation. We're to be transformed into the image of Messiah, who is the express and perfect image, the hologram, the holograph of God, essentially. I'd like to read you one other verse here, and this is in Psalm chapter 25, verse 14. It says, "The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant." And so this is that's a really amazing thing when you, and I would encourage you again, that is Psalms 25, verse 14. "The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him, and he will show them his covenant." And so the word secret there is the word Julie said earlier today, the word sod, and which means mystery, and it is the deepest level of interpretation. Sometime we'll get into talking about the levels of interpretation in Pardes and that sort of thing, maybe in a upcoming video probably. But it is the sod of the Lord is with them that fear him. The mystery, the sod, the concealed thing. And so this is something that ought to differentiate the people of the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the other religions, between the dead, dry religion and just these things that are basically businesses and social clubs that aren't in. I'm not saying that some of these places don't do some good things, but a lot of times they're just it's just a business, essentially a non-profit business, like a lot of other things, and they give people their little boundaries and tell them what to believe, and here's what you believe, and embrace this theology and this theology. And I think that we might ought to go ahead and close this, but I want to do a bunch of other videos that we've sort of opened up now that we've opened up the Pandora's box of this. I hope that maybe this is, I know probably a lot of people have tuned out, or maybe even looking at the title were turned off and thought, I knew he was a freak, and I don't, I don't want to listen to anything he has to say, and then other people might have stuck with it for a little bit, and hopefully a lot of you have stuck through the whole thing and checked it out. And again, we're not trying to encourage people to do anything foolish or get into bad areas or anything like that, but we do want to kick down some of these boundaries that have been erected that are preventing people from embracing and standing in their God-given inheritance and the things that are. It's the glory of God to conceal a thing, the honor of kings. Doesn't it say that the Messiah has made us kings and priests? If you're a sovereign, you've been made a sovereign by him, then you ought to want to seek these things out, it seems to me, if that's what you really are. And if you are somebody that claims that you fear the Lord, we know the beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord, then it says the secret of the Lord is with that person, with that people, and that he will show them his covenant. And once again, in Psalms or Proverbs chapter 1, if you look at that, these things are supposed to build in us the ability to interpret parables and proverbs and know dark sayings and be able to interpret these things and not turn to the ones who are misusing these things, but to be able to access these things through the right Spirit, through the Holy Spirit of God.
Well, and a lot of it, and this isn't comfortable, a lot of it, you just kind of have to, through your subjective experience, walk a road and ask the Lord to be with you and really let you know as you take different steps. I mean, there's not, at least I don't know of a blueprint, because you can say, well, the scriptures are a blueprint. Yes, but when you begin to look at the Hebrew and all of the different meanings of a lot of these things and what the prophets did, it raises a lot of questions. And so
It should.
it should. And it's not about going off into weirdness. God dwells.
Actually, it's more practical, a lot of it.
It is. It's just not carnal. It's just not where we live. But if you want more of God and you want more of His Spirit and His ways and His kingdom and His presence, you're going to have to be willing to give it up for a little bit of oddness and weirdness as the culture. Yes, I mean, compared to the culture, your values are going to be different. You're just like in the prophets' values in the Bible were different than the culture around them. They were weirdos, and I'm not saying we have to be weirdos, but what are we motivated by? What's our top priority? If we want direct experience of God and communion with God and relationship with God, then there's a lot of things we're going to have to shed, and we're going to have to get off the path just like Moses did to climb up on the mountain or climb up wherever the bush was burning that wasn't burning, and see with his own eyes and inquire into what is this, what is the meaning of this. It put him out of his comfort zone, and he encountered God, and he was nervous and afraid by it. He wasn't put to peace by his encounter with God. He was shaken up. And I think a lot of times that's the issue. People don't want their lives disrupted, and I can understand that. But our value system, what's your value system? If you want more of God, then you're going to have to start pulling some of these threads that will make your life feel a little bit uncertain, but you're opening up to the divine in ways that will only enrich your life.
All right. Well, thank you, and thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, share this video with other people, and if you have questions or comments about this or even criticisms, that's fine. Be sure and post it down below, or you can email us. Either way, goldenparadigm@gmail.com. You can get me that way. So you guys take care. Hope to see you soon.
See ya. What were you saying?
What are you saying? Trying to trap me?
I'm not trying to trap you.
I think we all know.
No,
that
I'm not
that's
trying to
what you're
trap
trying to do.
No, you're funny when you are talking to yourself before we start the video.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what you said.
I don't either, because I was over here thinking about something else.
Well, you're still doing it, so obviously I didn't mess you up too bad.
Yes, I am.
Oh.
Okay. Hope this pen doesn't fly through the air accidentally and lodge in your cranial tissue.
Well, if it's hot on video.
Well, you can't always tell about that thing. It might be photoshopped. Yeah.
Your whole person might be photoshopped. I might be doing all of these alone.
Well, then again,
You might be a digital man.
mm-hmm.
Matrix.
Yes.
Yes, I know that. You're mixing movies.
Yeah.
Is that Lieutenant Dan
Yes.
and Forrest Gump? Yes, I know that, Forrest. You don't have any legs, Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah. Okay.
You're about
Oh.
done.
Oh, I forgot which one I was looking at.
Oh my
Let's see.
god.
Oh. We're not going to have time to get to all this.
We're going to have time to get to the video. Hello, everybody. Oh, it's not time. Bye.
Well,
You want a
always
cherry?
I really don't. Thank you.
Are you done now? I know some side karate. Hiya.
Yeah.
Are you done now?
Not quite.
Oh my gosh,
Yet.
what else is there to do?
Eat your cherries.
I know.
And
Hey, if you like this video, please click like and subscribe to be notified whenever we release new content, and to help other people find us out there on the vast plains of YouTube land. If you have a question or a topic you'd like for us to do a video about, just leave it in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Later, y'all.